Michael Haneke is an Austrian film director and screenwriter. His films are often unconventional, and Haneke himself has some very interesting ideas about cinema as an art form. Michael Haneke comes across as a pretty miserable person with a nihilistic view of humanity. Over the course of his career, Haneke has made some of the most uncompromisingly bleak films in modern art. Many of Haneke's views on other films are equally pessimistic and negative. Examining Haneke as a filmmaker is often a depressing pursuit, as every opinion of his seems to relate back to his disdain for everything. Michael Haneke's films are very hit or miss for me, and while I disagree with many of his views, I think that his films are incredibly interesting. But there is no film of his that is quite as engaging and fascinating as his 1997 film Funny Games and its 2007 shot-for-shot American remake. Funny Games, made in 1997, is a story about two young men who hold a family hostage and torture them with a sadistic game in their family home. The film was controversial. It appeared at the Cannes Film Festival, and 1/3 of the audience were gone by the time the film ended. After a decade, Haneke chose to finish his vision for Funny Games. The 1997 original was supposed to be set in the United States, but this wasn't possible, so it was set in Austria. Now, with more creative control, Haneke decided to remake his film, shot for shot. This new version of Funny Games was a box office failure and has since been forgotten from popular film culture. But I think that Haneke's choice to remake his film shows how passionate he was about the story and messages it presented. So what is the point of Funny Games? Is it a brutal and vile film? Or is that the point? What is the movie trying to tell cinema goers? And why does Michael Haneke hate his audience? In the beginning, Funny Games looks and feels like a classic home invasion film. It starts out very slow with the Farber family arriving at their lake house. They then meet Peter and Paul, and from the description of the film, the audience knows what's going to happen. Peter and Paul will invade the house, and a cat and mouse game between the family and the boys will ensue. This doesn't happen. In the first moments of the attack, the strongest of the family, George, is crippled by Paul. The boys operate with cold and calculated efficiency, removing any hope their victims have at overpowering them. The games begin, and the family solve a riddle, only to realize that the answer reveals that Paul used a golf club to beat their dog to death. Anne asks where the body is, and in order to find it, Paul forces her to play a game of hot and cold. As he follows Anne outside towards the car, we get perhaps the most startling and chilling moment in the entire film.
Warmer. Cold.
In a film about torment and horror, this simple look by Arno Frisch and Michael Pitt is bone-chilling. It breaks any preconceived notion of what this film's rules are. Before this moment, Funny Games feels like a standard thriller, but this simple look changes everything. It changes Paul from a mere sadist into a character that can interact directly with the audience, something that is rare in film and even rarer in horror. It is hard to explain how shattering this look is. Paul is looking at us, knowing that Anne is about to find the dead dog in the back of a car. His look says, watch this. You're gonna want to pay attention to this part. Back at the house, the group sits in the living room. Paul explains that there is no way out of this situation, and he proposes a twisted bet to the family. Peter and Paul bet that by 9 a.m., all three family members will be dead. When asked why they won't just kill the family outright, Peter laughs and says,
"You shouldn't forget the importance of entertainment."
Young men then begin to gleefully taunt the family during the night. Paul creates a tragic backstory about how Peter was abused as a child, but soon begins laughing as it is revealed that the story was just a lie. Paul tells us that they're really just two kids who have nothing better to do than to entertain us, the audience, with a twisted torture and murder. As the torment continues, the boys don't take much pleasure in the family's suffering. It feels more like they are just doing a job, following a script. There are 2 moments of escape, but they are defeated without much hassle for the boys. Peter and Paul practically let the family escape, only to arrive at exactly the right time to dash their hopes into dust. There isn't a moment in the film where the invaders don't have the upper hand. This is where the film becomes a critique of the realistic thriller genre. It tells the audience that this film is going to be realistic and then gives them exactly that. The 2 boys win, killing the Forber family with ease and moving on. Funny Game critiques thrillers by unrelentingly showing us a family being destroyed. This takes away any of the morbid fascination that many of us get from horror movies. We, as the viewer, are left with nothing to enjoy. The fourth wall breaks only serve to reinforce the idea that this isn't going to go the way you think. The boys have power over the entire film. Paul tells us that he knows we want a movie with a plausible plot and a nice ending, so he refuses to give us that. Now, anyone who has seen Funny Games must be rolling their eyes and saying, "You idiot, you forgot about the remote scene. That breaks every rule of realistic storytelling." But I ask you, does it? Throughout the film, we've seen Paul break the fourth wall. His control over the story is complete, so how hard is it to believe that he could control the flow of time in the story? Beyond that, the remote scene highlights the total lack of control that the family and audience have over what will happen next. No matter what happens, even if the family gets the upper hand, the fundamental rules of this story's world will not allow the film to have a happy ending. While you may think that the audience already has no control over what happens in a film, you actually have more power than you think. A filmmaker rarely makes a film without audience control. Directors have to keep in mind how the audience will react to their work. It's a fundamental part of storytelling and art that often gets overlooked. Funny Games gives the audience a big middle finger with the remote scene, taking away any hope that the story will have a happy ending. The last piece of Funny Games that I would like to touch at is the way the film paints the audience as complicit in the violence and suffering that ensues. One of the most interesting lines in the film is delivered by Paul. "You must admit you've brought this on yourself." In the scene, it seems like he's referring to the fact that the entire conflict in the movie stems from some broken eggs that the family refused to replace, but this line is one of the most important pieces of the entire film. Funny Games is a movie that knows it's a movie. The villain Paul is aware of the audience's presence in the film, and he talks to us, breaking the fourth wall. He knows what kind of movie we want to watch and instead kills all of the family members. He tells us that we choose to watch this movie. No one is making us watch this family get hurt. It's the response to hearing someone say, "God, this is horrible to watch." Then don't watch it. By choosing to watch the film, we are causing the deaths of the characters. Paul is only a vessel to carry out the plot. That's why he has no real motives for doing what he's doing. The audience is the real force that is killing the characters. Paul makes the argument that if you can see it, it's real. This final disturbing notion finally reveals his perspective on the events in the film. You've just watched 2 young men torture and murder a family, and you did it for the sake of entertainment. Maybe it was a late night and you came across this film. Maybe you wanted some thrills or had heard of the movie's brutality, but you knew the entire time that something horrible was going to happen to this family, and you did nothing to stop it. The viewer can at any point turn off the TV and save the family, but we choose to watch, hoping that everything will turn out right. And when the last member of the family is dead, Paul stares at us, as if taunting us for the last time.